Thanks, Robert. Just get set up here. Hope everybody can see my screen.
We can.
There we go. And John, you should have control as well. So
Okay.
thank you, everyone. Appreciate the invite to present contracting themes of contracting strategy. John Strickland and myself, we're going to be running through today's presentation, and we hope to get through the presentation in 45 minutes and allow sufficient time for a good question and answer period. So for today's agenda, need for change, simple case for relational contracting. How do we know we're getting the best price, best value? Where to begin? I'm going to walk you through the vendor selection process. Why aren't we already doing this? There's been a number of CII research teams over the past 30 years, indicating the benefits here, which we're going to briefly touch on. And we'll wrap things up with we'll share some golden nuggets with you folks before turning it back to the group for some Q&A. So the need for change. Right? One of the biggest ironies is, with a fixed price contract, and a lot of these projects, it's anything but fixed price. And for those of us that have been around for a while and have planned and executed a number of projects over the years, I'm sure we all fall into this category, that our fixed price contracts may end up being nothing but fixed price. So 65% of our capital projects, fail to meet the business objectives. Many of us have seen this statistics in the past, but most of the failures are due to our project systems. Maybe it was poorly organized, communication, and our management of the planning and execution of these projects.
I always like to comment that when you think about this, when they say 65% failed, well, success was if you only went 20% over your cost or schedule. So that's a pretty low hurdle to jump over, and yet 65% of our projects aren't making it.
So what's the biggest factors? The biggest chunk of the pie there is our management factors and our organizational factors. 65% of these factors. Some of them are due to poor organization and decision making, and the decision making could be right back at what type of contracting model are we actually selecting for these projects. Contractual misunderstanding is another bullet identified there. Okay? A lot of these contracts are transactional type contracts and very adversary. Where the soon as the contract is signed and approved and implemented, the butting heads approach starts. Okay? Insufficient risk management in a collaborative contracting model. All of the plans are an integrated plan where all of the project team members are participating in developing those plans. And one of those plans is how are we going to plan and mitigate risks throughout the project.
Well, I love the phrase integration errors, which I first heard from John Pemberton. I think I've got control here. Let me try this. And seen that? Bruce, the slides aren't. There we go. So
yep. A bit of a delay.
Got a little lag. So I'll start here again. So most projects, this is just a typical project delivery situation, and most projects start out with a set of owner requirements. And very often the owner isn't fully aware or aligned to what their requirements are. But they will typically go off and hire someone to go do a design concept. And the design concept won't quite align with the owner requirements. And then we'll go off and prepare some kind of commercial bidding documents that don't quite align with the design concept. I like to say that the first thing I learned to say as a contractor coming out of college was, I can't bid your intent. I can't bid what you intended to design. I can bid what's on the paper, interpreted in the most boneheaded possible way. And so from that, though, we go and we get a CMGC on board. He gets a bunch of different trade contractors on board, and the drift continues until we get out to the job site. And the trade crews understand this even less. And this drift keeps happening and happening. I'll dismiss my, until you get this concept where we just keep having a hard time. It's that change, and this is hard enough to do before everything starts changing. Okay, and so we have this definite lack of understanding, common understanding across the board. And these are integration errors. These integration errors are very dangerous. And like any other error in a quality system, the longer they stay in the system, the more damage they do. The earlier we can fix them, the better off we are. There's a number of factors you can read on the side there. They're very disruptive. And one of the biggest things, I think, is makes everyone add risk and adds risk, and everyone has to add contingency to cover it. And then also, this starts affecting the culture that Jamie talked about as we first kicked off this session. And lots of misunderstandings, unnecessary conflict, and this is kind of the root cause. If that's the root cause, the whole idea of working together in a big room and these various sessions is to bring these people together in a common conversation so these people, to the degree possible, understand what these people are trying to accomplish throughout the whole thing. And we keep that connected. And it's pretty important that the actual players, who you have here, that this notion you bring in surrogate contractor to provide constructability content is sort of like a sports team that practiced with different players and then brought the real players out to play together for the first time in the game. So the part of what is happening during this whole thing is these people are rehearsing together and they are understanding what they're going to go do. So there's that thing that we'll kind of cover quickly in one slide. I think the simplest case for integrated project delivery, and again, this is a typical project delivery system, not anybody at CII, no particular firm, but most folks go out and they hire an AE and a CM, do some kind of a preliminary design, get some kind of a preliminary estimate, and you'll say, hey, does that fit the budget? And if that's no, you might go change it, but very often you go right into detailed design, contractor bidding, and after all of our design budget is gone, all the time is gone, after we've exercised the hell out of the market to get bids, we find out, hey, does that fit our budget? If that's yes, well, I guess we have semi-firm costs. Bruce just talked about we have lots of changes in the industry. And the problem is, what happens if that's no? And that's very, very disruptive because now we can't fund the project, we can't get started. The design team is supposed to be off on some other project. The contractors can't start their job, they get very frustrated. And this is a very, very disruptive cycle. Now, when I ask folks, how often do you go through this cycle? Bruce, what kind of answer do you think we normally get when we ask how often do we go through this cycle?
Well, the preference is only once, but sometimes you may go through that 2 or 3 times before you have a detailed design that eventually fits a project budget.
Right. And the question is, why do we keep this? Is enormously expensive, and I actually think that this is the cost here is greater than the benefit you would ever get out of competitive bidding. But there's a number of other factors. So the alternate is actually to bring people together early, and validate the cost before you go through the whole detailed design. And one of the things we've learned is that you don't need a detailed design to understand what's going to cost. You need the full scope. And so the advantage of that is we can get the cost much sooner, it's more reliable, and this is always faster because the team is there. So and this works a lot better if we're using integration methods that Bruce is going to talk about here.
Yeah, so these were the top 21 collaboration and integration methods that were identified during phase 1 of our I2PD research. These collaboration and integration methods, did the research team invent these methods? Absolutely not. Many of them are taken from the lean construction world, and do these collaboration and integration methods only apply to collaborative contracting? No. They could quite well be possibly being used in a traditional type of contracting model. But I'm going to, in a few slides from now, I'm going to run you through the benefits of applying this slide, actually, the benefits of applying CI, collaboration and integration methods, and what we call the CI index. So, during our research, we went out and we surveyed 85 project practitioners. Of these 85 project practitioners, they had an average years of experience of 29 years. So these individuals, whether guys or gals, they had a ton of experience, and most likely they had good projects and poor projects. So each one of these dots represents one of those 85 projects. And we asked them to define the most successful project in their career. We've all had projects that we've used a high degree of collaboration and integration. And as you come across the x-axis, when you have a greater application of CIs, collaboration and integration methods, principles and methods, greater than 15, there's no projects that failed, and they were all successful. And we had the individuals that participated in this survey to define success, and they define success as early cost and schedule certainty, customer satisfaction, increased safety statistics in a positive way, not in a negative way, and optimum design. So we've all had projects that were successful in a traditional model, but we've all had projects that had failed as well. And what we're saying here, for those projects that had a CI index less than 15, the success of those projects were random. Once you get out above 15 or greater, there was no projects in this survey that failed.
A lot of golfers would like to have a something that would take the double bogeys out of play, which is kind of what this does.
So another one of our key findings, and it was a direct relation to that previous slide. In the non-IPD projects, there was a couple of projects there that we surveyed were quite successful. With the majority of those projects, A through G, were not as successful as B and D. But the IPD projects, or the collaborative contracting projects, all of those projects, had high client satisfaction, had high, satisfaction delivery to cost, and the profit margins of our contracting friends. And our contractors are our friends. We're not in the business to put contractors out of business. We want our contractors to be successful. If our contractors are successful in a collaborative manner, that makes us as owners. And I talk about myself as an owner, even though I'm working for PTAG now. I spent 34 years working for an owner, Ontario Power Generation. So this presentation that John and I have teamed up with, he brings the contractor perspective, and I still bring the owner perspective to these types of presentations.
Yeah, this is some great research that was actually published by LCI, but I believe this came out of the University of Minnesota and another study from the Dodge analysis. Short story is much like what Bruce just showed you from the CII research. the projects that used a high degree of lean intensity, which correlates pretty closely with those 21 practices that Bruce showed you, were 3 times more likely to come in ahead of schedule and twice as likely to come in under budget. That's pretty compelling data that it's possible for your traditional project to turn out well. And it would be possible, I suppose, for your lean projects to turn out poorly. It's just your odds are a lot better if you have everyone working together for a common objective, and that just kind of makes sense. And if you, one more click. You get a little lag on the slide advance. So this is very interesting to me. I actually started my study of CII like in about 1989 or 1990, and at that point, one of the first reports out was the constructability report in 1986, which was very clear. At that point, CII was saying, to the degree possible, get the actual performers together in the room. If you can't do that, get a surrogate, but it's best to get the performers. And this whole concept of getting people together, having them work together in some kind of a collaborative way has been repeated in study after study. And one of the reviewers of this slide said, well, how about this study or how about that study? There just wasn't room to put them all on the slide because it's come up over and over again. And one of those studies was RT271, which asked, basically, if everybody knows that this is the best way to do this, why aren't we already doing this? And I bet that in the group today, there are a bunch of people who as individuals think this makes perfect sense. I'm all for it, but the organization I work for or my customer has rules against this. And so we might do a poll later on about how often that's the case, but that's very, very often. And when we looked at this at 271, what we came up with, it's all about these paradigms. And how you think the world works completely shapes how you see the data you see. And that paradigms are very deeply embedded. And we all have individual paradigms, but we also have institutional paradigms. The institutions have this notions about how we get the best price. And here I'll flip a few of them up here. We thought these were kind of representative. That, hey, one of the big ones is social science isn't real science. Well, I think we're finding now, yes, projects are very complex social organizations, and we need to start applying some of our scientific principles to how we work to go together. Collaboration is great, but you have to give up competition. I think that's absolutely untrue. You can be just as competitive in a competitive market or in a collaborative system. And we're going to talk about this a couple of times before we get down to we just can't take the risk, or we don't have time right now to go do this. This project's too important. We'll talk about that. So the notion we need, though, is that we need institutions to challenge institutional paradigms. And that's what CII and LCI are all about. That's what we're all doing, is we're trying to change the common sense about how we actually can go do what we all know is the smartest thing to go do. Real quickly, I'm going to talk about the biggest paradigm there, but how do I know I'm going to get the best price? And there are a number of reasons. One is if you have a project that builds in all that dysfunction that we described throughout the project, throughout the early parts of the slides, it probably isn't giving you the best price. It may make it you may be causing the most pain for the bidding community, but that's not necessarily getting you the best price. And so some of the things we do is, one advantage is we actually minimize or eliminate many of those very, very expensive integration errors. And these teams are practicing the project before it's even designed. We have the advantage that we're leveraging the talent of the team to go find better solutions. And one of the reasons to be hard to compare an IPD project to a normal project is that lean IPD team's almost always going to find an easier way to do it. They're running a shorter course than the other team. And we're building trust. I think a lot of people would recognize the importance of that. And also, this is kind of a big deal. We're enhancing competition by focusing on the pricing factors. And so the market competition is only effective on the things that the bidders have discretion to change. And that's really their pricing factors. You don't need the full design to find out what their pricing factors are. You can pick your most competitive team long before you've done the design. And think about how much money we spend on securing and enforcing those inflexible contracts. Whether, and want to challenge this notion of the free estimate. No, someone's paying for that. Someone's paying for all of that disruption. And then the other huge part of this is the lean system. It's based on an operating system that's much more adaptive and flexible, and it deals with the real life complexity. So trying to apply these fixed contracts to something that's changing all the time just doesn't quite work. And that applies both to the technical and the social aspects of the project. So, like this one, the single bottom line pricing is a two-sided coin. Yep, great. Traditional approach, we can get down to one number. That's a common denominator. That's probably pretty good. Other side of that coin, that's all you see, and you don't see it until it's too late to change your decisions. And you don't really, if the cost comes in high, you really don't know where to look. And one thing you don't know is where is the contingency. And guys, I think contingency in construction estimates is like fat in a ribeye steak. You can't see all of it, but it's just everywhere. It's embedded through there. So there's a lot of reasons to think we can be effective. And the grand irony, this was very similar to the irony Bruce showed at the start of the presentation, that this came out in a presentation Glenn Ballard and I did in 2011, that the steps we're typically taking to minimize cost guarantee that the goal won't be realized and that the treatment is feeding the disease. So it's time for us to go change the paradigm to go do something a little bit different. So how do we do that, Bruce?
Great. So where do you begin? If you've already decided your contracting model and you're partway down the project life cycle, it's very difficult to stop and change your contracting strategy. So what we're saying is, and this slide shows the project phases. Across the top is CII project phases, and we're just using this as an example. But there's other project phases identified, that generally line up with the CII project phases, such as PMI, CMAA, etc. Okay, so what we're saying, validation phase, you want to bring your team in, and I'm going to explain a little bit later how you select your team. You want to bring your collaborative contracting team in early. And what I mean by early, it's during that validation phase at your concept project phase. You want the validation team to finalize what you're actually going to deliver as far as scope, and nail down your scope early. You could start this validation phase without 100% knowing or 100% finalization of scope. Your team will help you nail down your detailed scope. And there's a number of outputs from that validation phase. I'm going to show you on the next slide. And then from validation, you're going to go into pre-construction, where your detail engineering, all your commissioning plans will be finalized. And then there could be some procurement during that pre-construction, during those pre-construction activities, long lead items, for instance, before moving into construction. And the execution and closeout phase encompasses construction, commissioning, startup, transfer of operational control, closeout, lessons learned, etc. But the importance or the big takeaway from this slide is the validation exercise that you'll run through with your owner team and your contracting team will provide you with that scope verification and early costs and schedule certainty estimates. And if you remember back to one of those first few slides where John presented, and that cycle of trying to finalize your design and create your budget, and the design is over budget, and you go round and round and round again. what we're saying is with a collaborative type contracting model, whether it be alliancing, I2PD, commercial IPD, etc., you can as an owner receive that early cost and schedule certainty way back at the concept or detailed scope project phase, which is using a validation exercise with your collaborative contracting team. So team selection, and this is generic procurement milestones. We have found that these milestones have been effective and benefit the owner. I'm talking about an owner's perspective here. Back in 2018, I implemented the first I2PD project within OPG. And within your own organization, it is absolutely imperative that you educate, orientate, bring on your support groups very, very early in the process of setting up a collaborative contracting model. You need your procurement team, you need your risk team, you need your PM team, your CM team, you need your legal team. All of the support groups within that owner's organization need to be on board early. If the internal project team starts down this path, we have noticed quite regularly there can be some showstoppers within an owner's organization if the owner's organization isn't completely aligned with this type of contracting model. There has been instances where the owner has started down the collaborative contracting path, but then maybe, for example, the legal team aren't quite ready yet to implement a multi-party agreement, for example. Okay, so the procurement milestones, expression of interest, you might want to gauge the market. If your contracting community is even interested in a collaborative type contracting model, what I will say is we've certainly seen the appetite from our contracting friends to work in a more collaborative and integrated fashion. You might want to go through some interviews during that expression of interest. Issue your request for proposals. We are finding just your standard specifications would be included in the request for proposal. You may have some collaborative and integrative language within those specifications, but technically the scope is the scope. There's very little change to what needs to be delivered to meet the business objectives through this particular project. Written proposals, you go through your vendor selection. What I will say, the scorecard. The scorecard isn't a traditional scorecard, but for public organizations, there needs to be a competitive process, and the notion that, well, this type of contracting model doesn't allow for a competitive process, that is very untrue. The selection process is competitive. The written submissions, and these are just a few of the bullets or the items that would be evaluated during the evaluation of these written submissions. The biggest one, excuse me, the biggest one is the organization that you're evaluating. Are they committed to work collaboratively? Are they committed to open book? Are they committed to sharing risk reward? Are they committed to working to a design cost or target value design approach? And is there a willingness to enter into a multi-party agreement with the other team members that will be selected? But one of the keys is the presentations. I highly recommend that you have face-to-face presentations. Well, in today's world, you know, it may be virtual. And maybe someday someday soon, hopefully, we'll get back to you know, meeting in boardrooms and meeting rooms and face one another, you know, face to face. But in these contractor, vendor, you know, equipment supplier presentations, it's extremely evident if they're, you know, longing for that change and embrace collaboration and integration, or if they're just, you know, talking the talk and writing, you know, nice glossy narrative in the written submissions. You really separate those that are committed to working collaboratively in a team environment, you know, win together, lose together environments, sink or swim environment in those vendor presentations. And is the organization committed? You know, and when I say organization, the senior executives within that organization, are they committed to work in a collaborative and integrated manner? So one of the methods that we talked about, those 21 methods, was AWP. Okay, and you know, this slide demonstrates how the collaborative contracting model aligns up with the stages of AWP. You know, stage one is your validation phase, and the outputs from your validation phase, and clearly lines up with, you know, the activities during the preliminary and planning design of stage one is your scope validation, your integrated estimates, your integrated schedules, the start of your construction plans. Okay. You may have also your integrated risk plans, but, and I make a note here, your commissioning planning starts early, and your commissioning planning, you know, starts during stage one of your path to construction, and throughout the validation phase is when you initiate, you know, how that piece of equipment within that facility is going to be commissioned and ultimately turned over to the end user. Pre-construction lines up with phase two. You know, I talked about maybe doing some procurement. If you're not actually doing your procurement coming out of detailed engineering, your procurement plan will be finalized. Your construction work phase planning will be conducted, you know, and the activities at site, you know, how are things going to be coordinated at site, and you know, with the difference between greenfield and brownfield type projects. You know, you may have a piece of equipment, you know, operating right next door to the equipment you're actually working on. So these brownfield type projects, they certainly present, you know, a whole other element of risk and coordination issues that need to be finalized during those pre-construction activities. And then stage three lines up with the execution and closeout of the project. So all of the detailed planning and your path to construction that has been commenced and developed throughout the first few stages, you know, will be implemented then in stage three, or the execution and closeout plan of the collaborative model. So on the right-hand side, there's a number of traditional contracting models that have been around for many years, and the evolution of these contracting models. On the left side, or the pink part of the circle there, would be a design bid build approach that many of us are accustomed to using as a contracting model, but they're bilateral contracts. It's a win-lose approach, and it's always the owner trying to push risk onto the contractors, and of course the contractors developing their estimate for their proposal based on the amount of risk that they're actually going to take on. Do the owners actually push 100% of the risk onto our contracting friends? Absolutely not. That's not the way it works. Through the center, where the circles intercept there, would be EPC or a design build model. You may have some co-location, and possibly you could use some of those lean methods and tools that we talked about earlier. One thing I forgot to mention, in regards to that CII index, it's fine to strive to implement at least 15 of those collaborative and integrated methods, but they need to be used at the right intensity as well. Okay, and they need to be used at the right time. It's not the same 15 methods that would be used throughout all phases of the project life cycle. On the right-hand side there is a typical I2PD model. It's a relational type contract that puts the project first, and it's a best for project culture. But it's as you move trust along through collaboration and integration and open communication, it certainly improves safety, early cost of schedule certainty that I talked about. But we're not saying a collaborative contracting model is a good fit for every project that's out there. Not at all. Traditional contracting models will be utilized and will continue to be used. But what we are saying is perhaps some of the 21 collaborative and integrated methods could be applied to your traditional model. Front-end planning, value engineering, pull planning, AWP, etc., and make your project more collaborative-ish than being non-flexible and rigid. So I selected I2PD here as a collaborative model. I do chair the CII research team. So this model was developed through our CII research that kicked off back in 2016. Okay, so I2PD is a combination of both commercial IPD and alliancing, and it addresses two risks. One being construction risk and the other being design risk, because in our world, in the industrial world, most of our projects include both design and construction risks. The multi-party agreement that was developed, that was a deliverable from phase one of our research. We are now in phase two of our research. Was developed from an existing EPC agreement, a commercial IPD agreement and an alliancing agreement, and we took elements from all three of those agreements, and we modeled the multi-party agreement. That agreement has been vetted through many legal and commercial organizations, plus our legal representatives that were on the research team. Okay. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every one of those bullets there, but a typical I2PD team or collaborative contracting team would include the owner, perhaps some consultants, general contractor, your equipment supplier, and your engineering team. One thing I will say, and I'm solely talking as an owner here, you want to be very, very selective on who you select to be on your owner's team. You want individuals that are open, that want to work collaboratively, that aren't solely focused on that traditional process. You want them to bust out of that traditional mindset. Will there be a tendency once you're in the project, especially that first one, to want to fall back into your traditional means and ways? For sure, it happens all the time. But you need a strong coach and facilitator to remind everyone that we're here to work in a collaborative model and not in a traditional protectionism type model.
That's really well
So
said.
here,
The one thing I would add real quickly from a lean perspective is, from the LCI perspective, we reached down a little deeper into more of the trade partners, but it's very much the same idea. And what you just said, that you have to have the resilience and the perseverance to go through the first little bit of choppy water without turning back is really important.
Yeah, will the trust be at a high level of trust right out of the gate? No, it takes some time to build that trust. Even within your own owner's team, we talk about our young up-and-comer project practitioners. They're ideal. It's in their DNA to collaborate, whereas perhaps some of us, John and myself, vintage, we're so used to working in a siloed environment and perhaps wanting to do everything our way, and so struck on process. We may not be the type of individuals that you would want on your team. So be very, very selective, you as owners, who you pick to be on your team.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with vintage guys on your team.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. John and I are strong proponents of collaborative contracting, AWP, lean. We're advocates of it. We can talk about this all day. But our vintage, our years, our individuals with the same amount of gray hair as us, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
We clear?
Yep. Yeah. I saw a good chance for a little humor there.
Yeah.
All these different
Okay. So collaborative templates that are out there right now, alliancing these IFOA contracts, templates. Alliancing for the infrastructure space has been around for a long time. IPD in the commercial world or the institutional world, hospitals, apartment buildings, malls, etc. It's been used. That type of template or contract has been used for many years as well. The newest one of the bunch there I talked about, it was the multi-party agreement, the I2PD multi-party agreement. It's recently been developed through our research and is in practice today. Back to you, John.
Yeah, I love it. So people know me well. I've been using this cartoon for a long time, but I love this image. You know that you got the warlord saying, "Hey, I haven't got time, or I can't take the risk to use any new weapons right now. I got a battle to fight. The arrows are coming in," and you can see the irony that there's something much better. But it's more than just a whimsical connection there, because if you wait until you're at the heat of the battle to start trying to use the new weapon, it might not work very well. And if you don't have the champions and the people that really understand how to work it, the guys will grab that machine gun and try and use it like a club. You know, they won't use it properly, and you can't roll it all out at once. So you have to learn to use your new weapons and tools a little bit ahead of time. Bruce talks about the critical nature of this onboarding. And so this is going to be, it seems like we're breaking the rules when we do this, because in the mindsets of many people we are. So this is what we're doing. We can take the risk, we can go move forward, and eventually, you know, the guys who embrace the new technology are probably ultimately going to win. And I think that's where we're going. Bruce was commenting on, is this right for every project? I would say that the collaborative contracting may not be right for every project, only the ones where cost, schedule, or client satisfaction are important to you. You know, those are the ones where I would kind of focus on the collaborative contracting. That's another bit of whimsy there at the end. And as we go on here, I think we have a few golden nuggets. And so, yeah, I a little too fast on the click. And so if Bruce, wait, summarize, if we were going to summarize this whole 45 minutes so we've been talking, what would the nuggets be?
Well, you know, I think the big one there, that this type of or these type of contracting models, specifically collaborative, you know, it provides early cost and schedule certainty, and it provides predictability. You know, whenever I was implementing I2PD into OPG, I asked that question to our president and COO. I said, if we run this model on one of our projects, you know, what is the outcome that you would desire? Okay, and this was for a generator overhaul, and both of them looked at me and said, tell me how much and tell me how long that outage is going to be. That's all I'm asking for. So early predictability certainly is the biggest one. You know, collaborative contracting, I mentioned already, it's been around for a long time, many years. Not so much in the industrial space, but it is certainly becoming and picking up attraction in our industrial type projects. You know, you want to de-risk the project, and de-risking the project, you need the team to work together in developing that integrated risk plan earlier. There's no better way to de-risk a project than have the team sharing the risk and developing that risk plan. You know, design bid build. Are you getting the best price? Probably not. What we're saying with collaborative type contracting, you're getting the best value. You may not be selecting the cheapest bid or the cheapest cost at the time of selecting your team. You may. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but you want to pick the best team that will provide the best value for the project, that will put the project first versus themselves first. What we're seeing is our contracting friends are making more profit with a collaborative type model. Most cases, not all cases, are making more profit by putting their profit at risk with this type of strategy. And that last bullet, I touched on it already. You know, collaborative contracting is not a fit for every project, but you would realize the benefits of applying some or a great deal of those CI methods in your traditional EPC or design bid build or whatever type traditional model.
Yep. One thing we didn't stick on the list, hi Sean, thanks for popping in, and is that the project experience is much better for everybody. In this type, then that's almost one of the most important parts, is that it's just a much more healthy way. So, how are we doing, Sean?
We're doing great. Is it time for questions and answers?
You bet.
Yeah, first I want to say fantastic job. I think we all know it just makes sense. So now the devil's in the details to kind of implement. So some of the questions that we have are what are the key aspects of the modifier industrial that drove the need for the term I2PD instead of IPD?
Yeah, so the two stands for industrial. So it's IPD for industrial projects. And as I indicated, our industrial, both our greenfield and our brownfield type projects, especially these brownfield type projects, they have both design risk and construction risk. And we took 5 principles from the commercial IPD space and 4 principles from the alliancing infrastructure space. And those 9 principles, they form the foundation of I2PD.
All right, thank you. The next is, could you briefly explain some of the other approaches to collaborative contracting besides I2PD?
I'm not sure we could do it briefly, but the effort is the most of what Bruce talked about is common to the whole family of these collaborative approaches, is that getting the people together, engaging the people early, and having a team of constructors with the goal of helping the owner realize their goals, instead of a group of contractors trying to optimize their contract. That's what they kind of all have in common. They all have culture in common. And so the similarities far outweigh the differences. The differences are subtle and important. And that's where you talk to one of your really experienced contracting folks to help you pick out which template you want to start with. But the common theme, I think, Bruce, you agree that this common theme of the spirit of collaboration, and that we're going to work together using some very sophisticated social techniques and decision-making techniques to get a better outcome, would be common to almost all of them. And the one below that, when traditional contracting are preferable to collaborative, I would say, sometimes it's much simpler. If you have a very simple project, you can go do that. It's just simpler. You have those templates. In my own experience, we have used very collaborative methods on very traditional contracts by convincing everyone to set their contracts aside and not enforce them and work together. So I would think there are times if you can't get into a fully relational contract, use a relational delivery approach. Coach on your project, it could help. You go take a couple of this.
Yeah, I'd add a couple comments there as well. In a traditional model, and we're developing a I2PD selection project selection tool. We've run it through a number of projects right now, and the 2 biggest ones, do you have design complexity, and do you have construction complexity? And there's a number of questions that go into that, and the model is 29 questions, I believe now. And but if you have a straightforward small contract, dollar value is another factor here. There's, in a collaborative type model, there's a heavy influence or approach to front-end planning. So if you have a $2 million project, the traditional model is the way to go. If you have a $100 million project, you may want to go with a collaborative type model. If
And it was
you're,
one-off.
if you're
If
putting
you
a
had
new
bunch of
roof,
small projects and could offset the cost of getting the team onboarded, then it probably still makes sense. And
Yeah.
that was the bottom question here. Why is this approach better for all jobs? Well, the collaborative approach is better for all jobs. I mean, it's just whether you go through that contracting form. That was my bit of whimsy earlier, that I would only use collaborative approaches where cost, schedule, or customer satisfaction were important. That the other approach works great if we want to have a lot of conflict on projects. There was one here about growing pains and wisdom. The one thing I'll say there, and I think Bruce, he kind of alluded to it, is when you're interviewing contractors, they're all going to say, oh yeah, we already do this. We've been doing lean construction for years. We file liens on all of our projects. That's how we get paid. And so you have to sort out those guys who are out there and will claim to it, dig deep, see, just see the ones who this is how they want to work. And also the growing pain is you're going to have a little resilience to get through the first few times that there are questions and people want to retreat back to their issues, and then people want to retreat back to their traditional methods for dealing with them.
Sean, you want me to take that top one there? Design
Absolutely.
change? Okay, so yes, there's going to be design changes throughout this type, or with this type of model, no doubt about it. As found conditions, could warrant a design change, right? But I talked about that integrated risk plan. That integrated risk plan also includes your contingency pool. Now, and I'm going to address the first and third question here with this answer. The goal is for us as owners and our contractors to preserve that contingency pool. That is one of the incentives with this type of model, that contingency pool will be shared at the end of the project if the project is successful. So the goal is to preserve that contingency pool. So if there's a design change, I would assume that the contingency will address for that design change, and perhaps there was anticipation, or was identified during the risk planning exercise, that there could be a design change here based on as found conditions. Okay? So there's probably some funding identified for that. If not, if there has been no contingency funding identified, then the funding comes out of the contingency pool, and what happens there? The contingency pool shrinks for all of the participants. So their reward at the end of the project will be that much less.
There's a rules play catch. I want to add that just a little bit. The other thing is a rigorous change control process is just as important in an IPD project as any other project. One really important difference is that it's not necessarily just the changes that are killing the owner, it's the high transactional costs of the changes. So one thing IPD does is it reduces the transactional costs and makes the contract much more resilient and much more flexible to deal with some of the inevitable change that comes up.
All right. I think the bottom two questions are kind of similar. So I don't know if you want to try to answer both of them at the same time. Regarding the incentives and the teeth.
Actually, there is teeth. Ultimately, it's the owner's money. Ultimately, the owner gets to choose things. The various forms would have various forms of teeth. However, that's you always have that. It's just you're not pulling that out. There are lots of different incentives, but the biggest incentive you're trying to do is align commercial interest so that the contractor does well when the owner does well, and that the contractor doesn't have to. It's not. You're trying to create a win-win situation where the interests are aligned. And the teeth, there's a variety of teeth. One of the big part of the teeth is you can vote IPD partners off the island in most of these arrangements, you know, and so you have to maintain your space on the team with everybody else. But those questions are kind of specific, but you're building a relational contract in which you're not relying on contract enforcement to get the job done. You have a contract, you can use it, but it's not the first tool you pull out. That's how I think. So Bruce, this is kind of a broad question. How would you clarify
Yeah,
that?
I'll add a couple comments here. You know, one of the biggest teeth in these types of contracts are the contractors are putting their profits at risk. So if the project is not successful, the contractors will still get paid, but will they make a profit? You know, that's to be determined. So it's in the best interest of all of the parties to work together for the project to be successful. And that starts right during that validation phase. And that starts with that early planning and you know, verifying and certainly defining scope early on, because if there's some scope items missed during the validation phase, where you know the contractors are signing on the line at the end of that validation phase that they're putting their profits at risk here, you know, a big scope item could be very detrimental to the profits for that particular contractor.
By the way, both traditional way, both parties have teeth. So if you want to flash your teeth, the other party's going to flash their teeth. I mean, it's kind of like it's a two-edged sword. And so the relational approach, and then which elements do you think should be prioritized? Well, basically whatever you can do to get the actual performers together early to understand what each other's doing. One of the very best things you can try to do is the last plan approach is a great first step to get people making commitments. Any types of team building or organization, so you get the team thinking as a unit and building the team. So those are, I think, the first things I would try. And that Bruce had, there was a list of like 21 things that the I2PD team came up with. But start with the ones that build relationships, communication, and trust.
Yeah, and I get asked this question, you know, regularly. Which of the 15, you know, should we choose? Well, we can't give you that answer. It's the team that decides which one of those methods and I talked about intensity early, which one of those methods at what amount of intensity would benefit the project. You know, there's certainly, you know, some of those methods that are glaring obvious, you know, working together in a big room, for example, front end planning, for example, value stream mapping, you know, co-planning, you know, but for individuals like myself and John to say, thou shalt use these 15, that's not the way it works. It's the team that
you kind of non-lean thinking there. And the bottom question is, yes, this is starting to show up in a big way in public sector contracting. There's been a number of case studies here out of in the Northwest of the United States, where in fact a big success story was the Edith Green building, federal building in Portland, Oregon, which was done in a public setting. So there are people advancing this in the public sector. It seems to be working. We were interviewing for a project with Bonneville Power Administration. They were very clearly using a much more collaborative approach. Theirs happened to be based on the DBIA approach to collaborative contract, which is design, build, done right, which is not quite as relational as the IPD agreements, but there are a large number of cases happening, and I think particularly in Australia. I believe, Bruce, you found out that in Australia, the alliancing was actually more common on public projects than private. Absolutely,
yeah. And back to the OPG pilot project, that, and you know, OPG is a crown corporation, is a government entity. You know, we had to fit the collaborative I2PD model within the existing procurement and PMCN governance. There was no appetite at all to revise governance to integrate this type of model into OPG. We had to, if it wasn't going to fit within our existing governance, we weren't going to run the project. But what I will say, if OPG can implement I2PD as a government agency, it can be done anywhere, because we are governance to death.
You know, a lot of, so I would say that the competition, is when hear about competition for jobs, yes, when the owner relies heavily on lump sum contracting, people won't collaborate. No kidding.
Yeah.
You're forcing them into silos. They're not going to collaborate. They're going to watch their own interest. So but what you found is the best owners attract the best contractors. And so contractors like this approach because it takes the risk out of it. They don't spend all this extraordinary effort bidding on a project they might not get. So it's very attractive to contractors. And so, and also they can respond to an IPD proposal with a fraction of the effort that they would spend on a normal proposal. So you can get very competitive responses because it's very attractive to the contractors. And there's a variety of methods out there that can help you do that. But there'll be people that want to work this way because it takes the risk out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, on the first question, do you have any sort of insights around, you know, the traditional lump sum type of contracts when there's lots of competition?
Well, I think that's a project leadership issue. And so I've said several times, you know, I've been on projects where we have very traditional contracts, but we just chose to be very collaborative on a job site. And if you have the right people running a project and right influence, you can still get people to collaborate. It just, the contracts make it more difficult. So, yeah, you know, what we say, be as collaboratively, you know, bring these principles in to the degree that you can. Just because you're on a fixed price contract doesn't mean you're powerless to go use some of these processes and tools. You can still go make your project a lot better. It's just, it's good when the whole contract setup is there to support you.
There may be some reluctancy though for open book, for example, within a traditional model. Sure. Maybe not so much with between owner and a specific contractor, but from contractor to contractor, there's a strong resistance there to be fully open book.
Yeah, one thing on lump sum, I know that in one of my earliest and most successful applications of doing this had to be in the 90s. We just got together and had a series of negotiated fixed price contracts. We got together and we say, if we all win, we get this, because for ease of administration, but we ran the job in a very, very collaborative way with everyone understanding each other's scope, and the parties just agreed to help each other keep their costs down, and it worked. So you just do what you can with the agreement you have and build the culture on your project. The contract doesn't necessarily force your culture. And what would you consider crucial? I like catching the bottom one. The crucial for agreeing on the project value, get the people who are going to be using the facility involved. Get the end users involved to understand what they really need. And let the contractors hear it. That way we'll fully understand the scope and requirements. The worst cases are when we never thought you were going to do that with this facility. And so those are the big risks. Well, I see Robert on board, which must mean we're out of time.
Yeah. So,
well, thank you all, Bruce, John, and Sean. Great session. And as we've said before, all of this is recorded, so people have a chance to go back and catch some pieces they may have they want to rehear. We're going to shift now for a break until the top of the hour. 30 minutes. During that time, suggest those of you please use the feed loop to visit our virtual exhibitors in their virtual booths. When we come back, we're going to be going into the first of two parts of AWP and lean moderated panel. And that'll be John Fish, Dan Farchier, and Fernando Espana will be the moderator. Thank you all. We'll see you at the top of the hour.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
gentlemen.